लॉजिस्टिक्स और ई कॉमर्स व्यवसायों के भीतर बड़े पैमाने पर जुड़े हुए हैं। बाजार में सफल बने रहने के लिए लॉजिस्टिक्स पार्टनर्स को ऐसे समाधान विकसित करना जारी रखना होगा जो चुस्त, लचीले, सरल हों और साथ ही कीमतों में प्रतिस्पर्धी भी हों। टाटा मोटर्स और न्यूज 18 नेटवर्क ने इसी मुद्दे पर एक कॉन्क्लेव आयोजित किया, जहां उद्योग जगत के दिग्गजों और ई कॉमर्स क्षेत्र के एक्सपर्ट्स ने चर्चा की कि कैसे भारतीय सड़कों के लिए ई कॉमर्स लॉजिस्टिक्स एक गेम चेंजर के रूप में साबित होगा।
We want to talk about the e-commerce market and which is really the digital driver on Indian roads as we focus on trucking into the future. So let me straight away start with you, Som, and talk about e-commerce. I mean, all of us are shopping on the Amazons, Flipkarts, Tata Clicks of the world, but there's a huge logistics industry that is supporting it. What are some of the challenges that they are facing, and do you think this new NLP policy is going to help iron them out?
We ship about 8 million packages a day. You know, every day India currently ships about 8 million packages through the e-commerce industry. It's been growing at a double-digit CAGR, and if you were to actually look at the growth rates for the next couple of years, it's high double-digit CAGRs again. So it's going to be a huge part of the logistics trade overall.
Let me bring in Chandar Agarwal, who's Managing Director TCI Express. Chandar, are you in this space at all when you talk about e-commerce?
So interestingly, you know, being in the logistics industry for almost 7 decades, somehow we have shied away from being in the B2C space. Because there are two angles to it. You know, the economics behind it is top line and bottom line. And the bottom line is very far away, very distant. So we have not really seen the light of that.
Are you saying it's easier to ship for B2B and there's more money in it than for B2C?
Absolutely. If you see, B2B entails the manufacturing part of the economy. And all the trucking industry that, you know, is essentially manufacturing. Also for the manufacturing industry, the agriculture, the mining, from that point of view.
So what's the biggest headache, according to you, for servicing the B2C industry when we talk about e-commerce from a logistics lens?
There are four more important points which I feel are a hindrance to the logistics profitability and growth in India. First is volume. Number two is the cost of delivery. You know, the delivery drivers are getting paid a very high salary, which will never fructify into a profitable business for any business owner. And number three would also, this is for last mile, not for the B2B part in the B2C business. The third would be, of course, the cost of fuel. And the fourth will be the infrastructure. So if
fuel, infrastructure, the cost of the driver, all of these you're saying are too high.
Yes, because the volume doesn't really
justify it.
Yeah, is not able to cater to that cost.
So Tata Click, we have Sandeep Kulkarni here. Sandeep, how do you respond to this? That there's simply no money in the logistics as far as B2C is concerned, and basically it's brands such as yours or the Amazons and the Flipkarts of the world which are absorbing that cost.
I don't think so that's the case, right? So B2C, Amazon been existing for last 20 years, right? And there are ways and means to make it break even. There are certain companies who are working purely in logistics space and they are still profitable, right? Year over year. So if you see a normal way, it's probably difficult. But if you use the technology right way, you use the analytics, you keep the inventory closer to the customers so that the shipping distance reduces. Right? All these things can help you reduce your shipping cost to a very, very great extent.
So today, right? When we talk about, for instance, for your shipping costs, I mean, are you outsourcing, first of all, your logistics?
Yes. So what we have done is we have outsourced almost all of our warehousing and logistics requirement, right? And with that, it is very easy for us to map our supply chain cost to the business cycle. If e-commerce is generally a cyclic in nature, some of the times when the sales goes on, your requirement increases, volume increases, and other times it's a really lean period, right? You don't want to have the idle cost to incur more, idle capacity to incur more cost, or you don't want to fall short of a capacity, so you will not be able to fulfill the customer promises. To match that, we found outsourcing, warehousing, and logistic both is a profitable solution for us, and that's what we have done.
So you disagree with Chandra, saying, no, there is, if you use technology right, then logistics is a piece that needn't be a drain.
Surely.
Okay. From Bolt, and you're a startup. Parag, what's your perspective? Because the perception is that, for instance, shipment costs, I mean, these are very high, and it's very difficult for smaller players to absorb these kind of shipment costs. I mean, what are the key logistical challenges? Is it, the condition of the roads? Is it fuel costs, as Chandra just mentioned? How would you sort of approach some of the views you've heard today?
Yeah. So first of all, I like to side with Mr. Sanjeev's opinion, right? When we talk about B2C and when we say B2C as an industry doesn't have money for their logistics service providers, I don't agree to that, right? You have to understand the difference between B2C and the traditional B2B businesses. Now, B2C is a new age business, right? In which you are bringing e-commerce platform and you are directly reaching to consumers with a proposition of cost and a proposition of convenience. Here we are talking about different players that they are loss making, but we have to also see the rate at which they are growing, both with respect to the number of shipments, both with respect to the number of consumers they are reaching. The comparison has to be a traditional well-established player had an advantage of time, right? But a new age player doesn't have an advantage of time. And they have an advantage of money.
What PCI Express is saying that, the volumes don't justify the cost or the investments.
So if you talk about Mr. Chandra and TCI Express, they as a business are doing brilliantly, right? Their tracking KPIs are very, very different in terms of PAT, in terms of gross margin, in terms of CAGR, right? But when you talk about B2C, it is also about a flourishing industry, which is not making sense today for an entrepreneur like Mr. Chandra because of the good green balance sheet they see. But in terms of future, after driving efficiency and after reaching to a point in which e-commerce as an industry makes sense because it is reaching to tier 2, tier 3 cities, it will definitely be an attractive option for all the other companies as well.
Okay, now servicing a lot of that logistics, and Mr. Kaul, let me come to you, is of course, the trucks themselves, because the majority of the goods are being moved, the freight is being moved via roads. And they are a big cost. And, how do you sort of react to some of the woes that B2C companies do face? Because logistics is a challenge, and it's an expensive cost as well on their balance sheet.
I see clearly few things, takeaways for us as OEMs. Okay, and where we are working along with many of them. Actually, our products do come after feedback session, one-on-one session, or a group discussion with many of them. Fleet has a very active role to play in the entire e-commerce industry. The kind of lead load matrix you have, the kind of technological configuration you have, the kind of load bodies you build, customized one, the kind of cabins you use, the kind of fuel you use. Okay, in this whole process, if you see, I want to comment specifically. One, we see the lead fuel still diesel for a moment, right? And therefore, we see the cost attached to that. So what changes we have made after incorporating their feedback? Sometime back, almost a decade and a half back, we introduced ACE with the CNG. We have almost 2 decades now, buses and our vehicle configuration I'm talking, but specifically on e-commerce, our platform for 4-ton to 16-ton, we have been very focused on how do we improve the TCO, how do we reduce the costs for all our e-commerce, and we actually were the first to introduce in this month only, on the 5th of September, 19-ton e-commerce, specifically CNG vehicle with a lead of about 1,000 kilometers, not stopping there. Even some of our operators said, we want in a heavy commercial vehicle, which is unheard, at least in India. Okay, yes, you have heard many in places in Brazil and European countries, you find a multi-axle. We have a 28-ton, which talks about covering 1,000 kilometers, uninterrupted business. And that is the kind of solutions. And I'll just add one piece. So the costs in e-commerce, it is critical to know the costs involved.
So what do you think, Parag, if I can come to you, what's the biggest problem statement that you think logistics companies such as yours are trying to solve for e-commerce players?
Right. So if we talk about specifically e-commerce players, logistics companies like us are trying to play a role as an executionist of all the planning which e-commerce companies does to ensure that the shipment is given to the right consumer, right? Now, when you talk about the whole ecosystem, right, in terms of there are different stakeholders with different roles to ensure that the e-commerce supply chain, which has been envisaged by companies like Tata Clicks, in which everything is being outsourced, or companies like Amazon or Flipkart, which have in-house logistics companies, but they are also behaving like aggregators, right? So we as an organization are ensuring that all those aggregators and whatever plan is coming has to be executed in the most efficient manner, meeting the SLAs, so that this supply chain can keep on working.
I think there's a lot for you as well, Chanda. Though you're refusing, TCI Express is saying, listen, B2C is just too intense an experience. We don't want to go in that space. But there's a lot of learning, including on the technology front, which you can apply as well.
Right. So we are the only B2B company in India which has automation in one of the centers, full automation. And we have able to reduce our holding time of trucks from 24 hours to just 8 hours. And also reduce our labors, number of labors that we employ. So doing that over 10 centers and across 29,000 pin codes that we deliver, we see that this is a very sustainable business model, and it is set to grow in double digits, both in top line and bottom line. It clearly shows that, I mean, if you compare B2C to it, already 10 years, it was started in 2012, and we've not seen the penetration in tier 2, tier 3 cities also till now. So when that happens and when it goes to, you know, tier 3 cities, the cost of delivery will be very high for logistics companies who are specializing in that to continue. So they would probably sell out, or they would, you know, probably the P money will dry out.
So are you saying that as a customer, I've become very spoiled because I think that, you know, I'm used to a 24-hour or maybe a 48-hour delivery window. Are you saying that as these companies stretch out into tier 2, tier 3 cities, and so bring in your perspective, aren't they already in tier 2, tier 3 cities? And how are they handling the logistics in some of those deeper pockets of the countries?
Let me give you a Pareto first. The Pareto for India is, you know, we have about 22,000 pin codes in India. Currently, all the e-commerce that we're talking about is in the top 500 to 600 pin codes out of that. So 40% of all e-commerce only happens in that 500, 600
So Chandra
pin codes.
is right then.
The point I'm trying to make is when that goes deep into tier 2, tier 3 cities, that's when you'll see that massive amount of growth. The same is true not just for e-commerce. It's true for the manufacturing industry. It's true for the passenger car industry in India. It's true for a lot of other consumer durables industry in India. So what we need to look at is once that kind of volume that starts to churn in, that's where Bharat will truly come up and say that, you know, we need deliveries in 24 hours, in 36 hours across the country.
Sandeep, is that akin to, you know, a few years ago, we were obsessed with, you know, the gross merchandise value rather than looking at profitability of e-commerce companies. Today, we are looking a little closely on what are the returns on investment, including PE investors. So does it make sense? Is it profitable for you to go into tier 2, tier 3, looking at some of the supply chain challenges which are there? Or do you think e-commerce, looking at the logistical challenges, will stay in sort of the urban pockets?
I'll give you certain statistics. Almost half of the orders that comes to Tata Click are from tier 2, tier 3 cities, right? And it's a huge percentage, 50% of the orders, correct? So how do you serve that? You cannot ignore that market anymore, right? Half of your business comes from there. So first is to have 100% coverage over, then use the aggregators, different logistic, so that every nook and corner of the country you could serve, right? Secondly is building up your assets near to the customer, using technology, placing the right inventory at the right place so that the shipping distance reduces. Again, the analytics and the different kind of logistic that uses. And third is something called as assisted buying. So you could call the customer support system and they will help you place the order. There are certain companies which I know, they have open brick and mortar shops where the computers are placed, people walk into it. They may not be able to place the order, but there is somebody else to help them place an order. Right? Yes. So people are trying to ensure that the tier 2, tier 3 are not left out, and you cannot leave it out anymore.
Tata Click is a company with deep pockets. Amazon has, you know, endless investments, money that they're willing to throw, good after the bad or whatever you want to call it. So what happens to the smaller players? What happens to those guys? they will necessarily have to outsource their logistics as well, right? But it still becomes a huge part of their cost.
Essentially, we're a bunch of suits sitting in this room. All of us love money. Good money follows great money. And that is exactly what's currently happening here as well. If you look at all the private equity investment that's come into this industry in the last 36 to 48 months, where has all that money come from? That money has not come in from automotive players technically or logistics companies technically. It's come from outside the industry to the industry with a gestation period attached to it. What will happen with all the small players who are part of this industry? What we perceive is, at least in the immediate future, you'll see a lot of consolidation also happen in the industry. I mean, technically speaking, we talk about Rivigo, Delivery. 5 years back, nobody knew these names. When you see a lot of the smaller players, like you asked, you will see a lot of consolidation in the industry. For the industry to become efficient also, you will need scale and size. A lot of the truckers, a lot of the smaller players who have, 2 to 3 trucks in their name, there you will see that they will all start coming together in terms of getting business.
So if there's going to be industry consolidation, Mr. Kaul, what does it portend? I mean, from just in terms of, for instance, for your market, do you see this market perhaps getting a little tighter as, some of this mad funding which has been happening starts drying up? Because there seems to be signs of it as well.
Okay, interesting question. So first of all, let's go back. He's got a lot of statistics. He spoke about 8 million shipments to 25 and 100 million to 350.
Correct.
Okay, that is the size. Then we spoke about tier 1 firing, tier 2, tier 3 still suboptimal. Let's look at pandemic, what pandemic taught us. Rural geography we thought will not be digital savvy, the adoption will be far later and all that. But there's something else happening around, much faster adoption. Okay. Then we said technologies, we've been talking for the last 10 years, this point on consolidation happening, which means in our trucking industry, typically big customers becoming even more bigger and small in the retail segment somehow going out of the system. That's not going to happen. In our country, this is my belief. In our country, everybody, there is a room for everybody. There is a growth, it just started. If we are talking this scale of multiply 3, 300 times actually he spoke. So there is so much of growth in it but what we require, to understand is how do we manage these entire stakeholders through the journey of this truck. So for example, there's a small operator, whatever you may define, 1 vehicle, 2 vehicle, 3 vehicle, and there's a movement happening from Gurgaon to Amazon, he said, Bangalore. If you are able to provide him through the journey support system, you have a robust ecosystem to support. I'm telling you, everyone in the system will thrive. I don't see that as a challenge.
Sandeep, are you as optimistic? After all, we are talking about a global recession, tightening belts, PE funding drying up. What's your outlook?
It definitely looks promising, and with we have been talking about the NLPs, Gati Shakti, Bharatmala, Sagarmala, and all these things. Seamless integration of the different departments and everything. All this will only bring down the cost, right? And that is something that probably I would say is everybody is looking at. So what else the e-commerce industry wants? A lesser cost and a higher speed, right? And the right steps have been taken towards it, and the right people are backing it. So I'm definitely 200% optimistic.
Okay, fantastic. Chandar, do we call you back after 2 years and find you've made an inorganic acquisition of a B2C company?
I cannot comment on that.
But what's the future looking like?
For the sake of my shareholders.
But what are you focusing on in the future?
So we have a very solid business model, and we will continue with that. And it's going to have compounded growth of top line and bottom line. So
I think, Parag, you should perhaps take some lessons from what Chandar has to say, since you're looking at optimizing the entire
So I completely
logistics.
agree with him, right? Our views may be differing with respect to the opportunity that e-commerce industry provides, but not with respect to how TCI Express has been running efficiently. But with respect to the future innovation, right, I would still say that we talk about AI, we talk about ML and different legs of supply chain. In India as a country, especially into the logistics market, right, we will have multiple phases running parallelly. We'll have majority of the population, majority of the player moving towards technology adoption first, right? Those who have already matured in terms of technology adoption will move to AI and ML. So e-commerce provides you that platform, right, to basically develop that technology and solve those problems into B2C space, where actually, as Mr. Sanjeev said, impacting the cost of delivery and ensure high service levels.
So actually the hub of innovation is going to be there from e-commerce, which is perhaps going to percolate out to the rest of the logistics industry. Som, the big picture for us.
The last thing that I think we haven't spoken about is probably alternate fuels and value-added services within the industry. I do foresee, alternate fuels helping people to reduce costs over a period of time.
What about drones and all of that?
Absolutely. The Amazon drone, it's a video right now. I'm not too sure if it's too practical for India. But before drones, I think there's a lot more innovation that is expected to happen. If Sir can go ahead and give us, flex fuel trucks in the near future, or the Tata Ace can suddenly convert itself with a bigger load carrying capacity.
We need air conditioning in the trucks before that.
You see, we have to move in stages. We believe telematics capability is the first adoption, which has to actually be translating into everyone.
I think Chandar has a basic requirement. He wants air conditioning in the trucks.
Of course, that is available. I sell almost 30%
Today
of
we
my
don't buy
trucks
cars,
goes in air conditioning.
it's a hygiene. Same way it should be a hygiene in trucks.
On the lighter side, TCI is one of my very key customers, and and in terms of technology adoption or the comfort to the driver, they were the first to pioneer in this kind of in medium and heavy trucks, an ultra cabin from Tata Motors walk through. You have a far better, superior comfort, air conditioning required, mandated. So a lot of these areas, but I don't want to be specific on Tata Motors as OEM. But yes, we got to be seized of the fact that change is inevitable, and innovation from OEMs is also required, fuel, etc. I did speak about CNG, etc.
Right.
Much more would be coming. That's all I would say.
Okay, great. Thank you, guys. Awesome discussion. Thank you so much for joining us. Bye.